the Subcommittee on Higher Education meeting this afternoon, and I want to welcome everyone who's joining us. Before getting started, I would like to introduce the committee's extern for this summer, and that is Donna Tran. Donna is a rising senior at Virginia Commonwealth University, majoring in political science and philosophy of law with a minor in economics. The subcommittee is excited for Donna to be with us today and also for her interest in state government. Donna, if you would give us a wave, and we would certainly like to welcome you joining us here this afternoon and for your interest in state government. We appreciate you working with us and for being with us this afternoon. And this afternoon, we have several presentations with a focus on low-income students' access and completion at Virginia's public colleges and universities. It is my intention to finish around 4 o'clock, but certainly we're not going to be wedded to that time. So please feel free to ask questions. And we're going to begin our discussion right about now. So first, we're going to have Tyler who's going to provide us a review of higher education trends. Then Wendy Kang, Finance Policy and Innovation Director at the State Council of Higher Education for Virginia, has several updates on the Virginia plan for higher education, and the higher education cost study will follow Tyler. Then we are delighted to have 3 presidents from Virginia's public institutions to speak on low-income students' enrollment and success at their institutions, as well as in our higher education system. Joining us will be Dr. Javon Adams-Gaston from Norfolk State University, Dr. Paula Pando from J. Sargent Reynolds Community College, and President James Ryan from the University of Virginia. So we're so happy to have the 3 of you here to share with us information about what's going on at your institutions. So Tyler, if you will go first.
Senator Locke. For the other members of the subcommittee, I'm temporarily covering the higher education area, so please feel free to contact me or April Keys if you have any higher education trends or higher education questions. Today, I'm going to go over a few higher education and demographic trends of our K-12 students. Hopefully, these trends will help set the stage for the president's presentations later. Let's start with higher education. So in Virginia, Virginia's undergraduate enrollment averages around 430,000 annually. In 2012, it was approximately 413 students enrolled in Virginia's institutions. And when we look at enrollment by race and ethnicities, enrollment levels for white and Black undergraduates have declined, while we've seen increases in Hispanic and Asian undergraduate enrollments since 2011. It's also important to note that enrollment declines more recently have been at the community college level, while the 4-year institutions have increased enrollment slightly. The strong labor market prior to COVID-19 may be one reason that the community college enrollment levels were decreased. Turning to the enrollment of Pell students, typically students who receive federal grant aid and they're low-income students. In 2018, 140,000 students were eligible and received Pell grants. 39% of those Pell students enrolled at a 2-year institution, while 34% enrolled at a public 4-year and 28% enrolled at a private 4-year. You see on the graph that Pell students peaked in 2013, right after the Great Recession, at 166,000, with approximately 40% enrolled at the community college level. We also know that Pell student enrollment varies by our public 4-year institutions. At the public 4 years, Pell student enrollment varies from 70% at Norfolk State and Virginia State, while other institutions have fewer than 15% of their total enrollment as Pell students. Overall, in 2019-2020 school year, 27% of the public 4-year students received Pell. We also know that just like the Pell student enrollment variance, graduation rates vary at the publics. Overall, the 6-year graduation rates for the public 4-year institutions is approximately 74%. However, the schools that have higher Pell students typically have lower graduation rates, while the schools with lower Pell student enrollment have higher rates. Pell students at certain institutions such as William and Mary, UVA, and Virginia Tech graduate at higher rates compared to Pell students at other institutions. The presidents will be better able to speak later on the completion challenges facing Pell students. When we also look at the graduation rates by income levels, there are clear gaps that emerge in completion by income. So we know that 82% of 82% of students from higher income families graduate within 6 years, compared to 72% for their middle income student peers and 60% for Pell and low income students. This has remained largely the same, with slight improvements for low income students in academic cohorts early in the 2000s. Turning to more demographic trends of K-12 students who will be the future higher education enrollees. Over the past 10 years, we know K-12 enrollment has grown by 3.5%, or about 46,000 students. However, Virginia's public schools have seen a change in their demographics. Students are becoming more diverse in Virginia's public schools, and we've seen a 35% increase in Hispanic students, a 34% increase in students who are of mixed race, 14% increase in economically disadvantaged students, and then a 21% increase in English language learners, while white and Black K-12 students have declined. So overall, students in K-12 are increasingly being identified in higher needs subgroups than before. Additionally, we know that Virginia's public graduation numbers are relatively flat and are projected to peak in 2026 at about 92,000 graduates. And for the next 10 years, high school graduates are projected to decrease on average about 0.3%. And when you compare that to the previous 10 years, K-12 students, the number of graduates graduating from K-12 increased about 1% annually. As the numbers of graduates flatten in Virginia, the graduates are becoming more diverse. By 2035, 21% of graduates are projected to be Hispanic. This is a 59% increase from 2019. And white graduates are projected to decline by 21% from 2019 to 2036. And as we know from the previous demographic slides that I had, students are in more high need groups. But we know currently, the students that attend colleges, there are differences in those students. In 2019, 69% of high school graduates enrolled in college within 16 months. This has been consistently about 70% for the last few years. But currently, female students, Asian students, white students, and mixed race students enroll at higher rates than the overall 69%, with Black, Hispanic, economically disadvantaged, English language learners, and male students enrolling at lower rates. With relatively flat growth in K-12, higher ed institutions will have to grow enrollment from among the students that traditionally do not enroll in college to meet our state attainment goals and to close attainment gaps in the state. We also know there are differences in which institutions students enroll in after high school. In 2019, of the 69% of the graduates enrolling in college, 65% enrolled at a four-year bachelor's institutions. However, there's variance in this because over half of Hispanic students, English language learner students, economically disadvantaged students, and disabled students are more likely to enroll at a two-year institution. So variation exists in which college students, in which type of college students enroll in. Madam Chair, that completes the demographic trends. I'm happy to answer any questions before we move on to the portion of the presentation from Chev.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Who is that? Senator Edwards?
Yes.
Okay, Senator Edwards.
Yes, if you look at first full page, second page, Virginia's undergraduate enrollment average is around 430,000 a year. This declined to look like from 2011 from 444,000 to 2020, 413,000, fairly consistent decline. How do you explain that decline? And this is when the population presumably is growing.
Yes, Senator Locke, Senator Edwards, undergraduate enrollment has declined, and it's mainly declined at the community college level. One reason for that is probably the strong labor market before the pandemic. Less people were enrolling in the community college because they were employed and they did not need to gain an additional credential or skill, so they were not enrolling in the community college system. But over that time period, we've seen an increase in enrollment at the four-year institutions.
So you're saying the four-year institutions have gone up compared to the community colleges?
Yes, slightly, sir.
Okay, and why? How do you
Senator Edwards?
Yes, Senator Chair, Madam Chair, how do you figure that?
I believe those have continued to go up because of the population growth in Virginia.
Well, Madam Chair, I'm still having trouble understanding why the increase in 4 years, but the community colleges have actually gone down, relatively speaking. I actually thought it was the reverse. Can you explain that?
Senator Locke and Senator Edwards, I may call in a friend here and ask Wendy if she has any further explanation for the changes in enrollment demographics.
Yeah, sure. And Senator Edwards, also, we're joined by President Pando, can also probably add some context to this. This is actually part of a national trend. Since the Great Recession, there was a rapid increase. Typically, when the economy is in decline, we'll see larger enrollments. And when the economy is doing well, community colleges students enroll less. And again, what's happening in Virginia and has happened is something that is happening in many states, nearly all that we've seen. But I'll let President Pando see if there's anything else she would like to add.
Yes, thank you, Wendy. And part of that will be covered in my presentation. I think the magic question in this is who enrolls at community colleges? Who is the student population that enrolls? And then lay over that a pandemic, a racial justice movement, and all of the things happening across the country. And I think the answer comes fairly quickly as to who left higher education at the highest rates.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for Tyler before we move on to Chef? Okay, thank you. We will now move on to the Chef report.
Well, and as Tyler brings up that presentation, I'd like to thank you all committee members for inviting us and being allowed to join you today. And thank you, Tyler. That's a good background. I think we always try to start with the data and try to understand the context of the challenges that our higher education institutions face. And what we'd like to talk to you a little bit about today is what we have started to do and actually continue to plan to do and in the coming years through the context of our strategic plan, the Virginia Plan for Higher Education, and our cost study, in terms of ways that we can look at helping more low-income and minority students enroll in Virginia. I'm actually joined today, too, by a colleague at Chev with me, Paula Robinson. She is the Associate Director for Equity and Engagement and is actively involved in the activities that she'll be able to talk to you about in a minute to give that context and can tell you a little bit more about what we're planning to do. I'll come back at the end and just talk a little bit more about this cost and funding needs study, which you recently funded at the session, and how that can help as well. So Paula, would you be able to talk a little bit? And I think Tyler's working on bringing it up, so maybe we'll just keep talking while he's doing that.
That's fine. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you to Madam Chair Lucas for inviting us, and to the subcommittee members for having us to have this conversation about equity, about higher education, and the plan, Virginia Plan for Higher Education, and the cost study, and provide you with an update. Tyler did a great job of kind of placing us right where we need to start, and that's with the data. That's exactly what Chev did as we started to look at our new plan, our 6-year plan for higher education in Virginia, which is now the 2020 through 2026 Pathways to Opportunity Plan. We began looking at the data and looking back, in August of 2019 to see where we were. What does the data tell us? And as we began to reach out to stakeholders and lay that on top of the data, there are conversations grew around access, cost, and quality. Then 2020 occurred. And with racial reckoning, our eyes on injustices and disparities, and we all faced the pandemic together, the conversations began to shift. And the discussion focused on three themes, and that was equity, affordability, and being transformative. So the backdrop of 2020 really did provide an opportunity to shift the conversation, to not just look at the things, but the how. How equitable are we providing our education? How affordable is it? And how transformative is it? And this went along with our shift in language. Some of you may remember our previous plan, the vision was to be the best educated state. We wanted to be number one. We switched that, as you see at the center of all these circles, to becoming the best state for education, a much more inclusive vision. Rather than comparing ourselves to other states across the country to be number one, we decided to look at ourselves and compare our data to ourselves. So looking at how we were serving and supporting different populations, different demographics across the state versus comparing ourselves to other states, and ensuring that we were indeed providing the best education, we're the best state for education for all students. Many of you may think about this in terms of, we think about the race to the top, and it's not, and you're always trying to get to number one, but the real learning happens in the journey. This new approach to looking at the plan looks at the journey, how we get there. Are we doing it with equity mindedness? And so equity serves as the underpinning for the entire plan with these primary three goals. To be equitable, higher education in Virginia must be equitable. That means we have to work to remove barriers and close gaps for students. To be affordable, we have to lower costs while maintaining quality. And transformation, to ensure that higher education really does change lives and changes all lives, and that all are afforded the opportunity to increase social, cultural, and economic well-being. Those are the benefits of higher education. And with this plan, we're working to ensure that we apply that equitably. And so, of course, with that, and Tyler, you can move ahead, we have to look at our metrics. For goal 1, we'll be looking at attainment and enrollment. Goal 2, which is affordability, we'll be looking at the number of the awards that are being given out and borrowing, how much students are borrowing, how much debt they're incurring. And goal 3, transformation, will be focusing on wages. Now, before you say anything, we know that there are many other benchmarks that we will be looking at, but the great thing about these 5 is that we have the data now, and we have the ability to disaggregate it. This is something that we didn't do in the past period, really, at really disaggregating our data and assessing, again, looking at ourselves and comparing our own data to ourselves. How are we serving different populations across the state? How are we serving different regions across the state as it relates to attainment, enrollment, awards, borrowing, and wages? So we're really pleased to be able to kind of really focus in on these 5 metrics. Meanwhile, we will be looking at other benchmarks as we move forward. These metrics were just reviewed by council in March and approved. And we'll actually be looking at the activities to support the metrics and the goals next month, in the month of July. So while the plan is still in development, many activities are already occurring. You can move forward, Tyler. Things are already underway to support low-income students, which I know is the focus or the concern for this gathering. But we all know that we can't get out what we don't put in. So the focus of the beginning, I'll start with talking about the access initiatives. I will be going through these a little, not exactly in the same order, but I think it makes sense in terms of how we really look at this approach to addressing our concerns. So the first step is really looking at access, who's getting in the door. And so we have long been looking at this relationship with K-12 and the transition between secondary and post-secondary ed. And we're excited that this year we are moving to actually creating a joint position. So a position that will be housed at VDOE, but supported by both SHEV and VDOE. Many of us know, if you're watching the Olympics, if you're look at relay races, when you're doing a relay, people start running together first before they do the pass off, the handoff. And so that's what this position will create. So while we're always talking about this warm handoff between K-12 and higher ed, we now have a position that will actually facilitate that handoff, that can be part of the conversations and ensure that some of the initiatives that we have, such as 1, 2, 3, Go, and the GPS, Guidance to Post-Secondary Success, indeed are embedded in the K-12 culture, but being informed by higher ed. And so there'll be a nice warm and informed handoff for students. We're working for it first in the infrastructure, and we believe that that will trickle down to how students interact and are being engaged in K-12 to go to higher ed. In addition to the access programs and looking at those transitions from K-12 to higher ed, we're also looking at the transitions for transfer students, and that's through our Transfer VA initiative at the bottom of your screen. Here, we're really focusing on, again, looking at creating seamless transfer for students and improving their outcomes as transfer students as they go from 2-year to 4-year. This effort began back in 2018 or 2019. But in 2020, when all that has occurred in our environment, they took a real focus and did a call to action to make sure that the efforts that they were making were not just about improving transfer in general, but making sure that they were disaggregating the data and applying an equity lens to ensure that everyone would reap from the benefits of the progress that they were making in the changes that were being made. In addition to that, the transfer initiatives, we're also looking at what I'm excited about with the transfer initiatives. They are also not only looking at mapping out courses, but also looking at the services to ensure that their students feel included on the campuses. So mentoring programs, bridge programs, dedicated staff and faculty to those populations. And so I'm excited that that looks not just at the mapping and the logistics, but it also looks at the environment. This takes me to diversity, equity, and inclusion plans. I really appreciate that this was passed this past spring or this past General Assembly, where it requires state agencies to submit DEI plans. This will be our first time to really see the environment that is being shaped for our students and to focus on increasing inclusion. So this will be the inclusion of, for the example, low-income students. How are they being engaged? How are they being prepared for? How are they being supported? We'll be able to see that in these plans and then offer support to our institutions. And lastly, as we talk about creating a better environment and culture for our students, obviously we can't forget finances. And so we appreciate the increase in financial aid that we received this year, as well as the passing of the free college programs G3, which is our last dollar financial assistance program for students at the community college, and also VCAN, the Virginia College Affordability Network, which provides funding for our public HBCUs for students who live within 25 miles of the institution may go tuition free. So we are really excited about all these initiatives, and many of these initiatives began through legislation. So again, I want to say thank you for your work in this effort. But there's more to come. Tyler. We will continue to advance implement the Virginia Plan, approving activities next month. Along with that, we'll have a dashboard which will support will support those metrics I mentioned earlier, the 5 metrics. There'll be a public dashboard, so you'll be able to see the data and the gaps that we're trying to close at our institutions. We'll be hosting convenings not only with our institutions but also with communities, so we can better understand what the barriers and perceptions are. And then, as always, budget policy recommendations. This is our routine work that we do annually, but we're excited because we are now applying a consistent equity lens to this work. Our routine work that we do in SHEV, we're applying an equity-minded lens. So it's not just equity initiatives, it's in our day-to-day work. It's how we function now and applying an equity-minded lens. And lastly, the cost study, which Wendy will provide you with more information. Thank you, and I'll be open to questions at the end.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. I have myself on mute. And as Paula mentioned, just to quickly talk about the cost study, this is something that'll be happening over the next year. It was funded during the last session and actually was unfortunately unallotted due to the pandemic, and rightfully so. But it was reallotted during this session, and we thank you for your support in this. And this is really just relooking at our funding models. It's been about 20 years since this has been looked at. And we know that, action, particularly if we want to look at enrollments of different students and support services, is taken when we're able to really think about where the money's going. And so what is it that we can do in terms of funding and how the state funds institutions to support the needs of the Commonwealth, whether that's enrollment of more low-income students or minority students, alignment to workforce needs, or any of the other areas that are priority for the state. So this effort is really to relook at that. It's about a year-long process. We'll be considering the changes in student demographics that Tyler highlighted, the goals of Virginia Plan, the data, and thinking about equity and fairness in funding. You'll see here the timeline for the project, and we've just issued an RFP to have an outside group to help us. We do need to submit a work plan to the joint subcommittee, and I believe some of the members here are members of that. So we'll be looking to come back to you and work with the staff about how we can do that this summer, and to have a plan in front of you for you to look at and provide input on. A preliminary report is due at the end of this year with a final report in July. We expect that a lot of the work on the funding models will probably take place, given the timing of everything going on this year, probably after session of 2022. So we'll focus mostly in this year on a lot of background work, learn from other states, look at some efficiency and effectiveness models, and then begin to look at some costs at institutions and provide some benchmarking in that area. But we'll look forward to bringing this updates to you back at different times along the way. And certainly we'll be happy to answer any questions at any time. So thank you again for having us, and we will be happy to answer your questions now or at the end.
Are there any questions to Wendy or Paula at this time? You guys must have been outstanding. Okay, thank you. We'll now move to our presidents to give reports on enrollments and success at our public colleges and universities. And Dr. J, you're up first.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chairwoman Locke. I thank the members of the subcommittee. I'm Dr. Javon Adams-Gaston. I'm president of Norfolk State University, just about to end my second year here at Norfolk State University, and it's been outstanding, even though we've had the challenge of the pandemic. I also have had the pleasure and honor to chair the Equity and Action Task Force, which is a task force of the CHEV Council of Presidents. And what we do there is focus on college and university presidents working together to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion across Virginia's institutions of higher education. I can tell you that we are all engaged and caring about what should happen next in order to maintain and to push forward that diversity, equity, and inclusion. This afternoon, I'll talk to you briefly about the enduring role that the Virginia Historically Black Colleges and Universities play in advancing diversity, social mobility, and economic growth throughout the Commonwealth and beyond. We have the pleasure at Norfolk State University of being Virginia's largest historically Black college and university. We are a U.S. News and World Report Top 20 HBCU, and we also have the distinction of being one of the Commonwealth's most affordable four-year public institutions. That's important to us, to our mission, and to our history. We were founded in 1935, and I always say to people, in 1935, when we were founded, we were in the midst in this country of a Great Depression. And a local community right here in Norfolk and the Hampton Roads area believed that every citizen should have access to high-quality college degree, regardless of race, gender, or socioeconomic condition. They believed, in fact, that African-American students, Black students, needed to have a quality institution of higher education in order to move their social mobility as well as the economic growth of the community. Today, NSU is nationally recognized as a leader in cybersecurity, engineering, the arts, nursing, and allied health. Our vibrant living learning community is where culture and cultural diversity and innovation converge in order to produce transformative outcomes for our graduates and for the community at large. Our focus is access, affordability.
Did we lose her?
Here I am. And the 2
okay.
years that I have been here, we have focused directly on those areas. The end operating.
You're muted, Dr. J.
Okay, something is, I got it. I think I figured it out. I'm good. Our annual operating revenues exceed $200 million. We have more than 1,200 employees and over 5,000 students. We're more than just an institution of higher education. We are a vital economic engine and force for social change. Education is always the great equalizer because it's one of the clearest pathways to social mobility. Research has consistently shown us that the value of a college degree economically. So consider, for example, that a high school graduate can expect on average to earn $1.2 million during their lifetime. Those with bachelor degrees flip that to $2.1 million. That's a considerable difference between an individual with a high school degree and one with a bachelor's degree. At the master's degree, it's $2.5 million. At the doctoral degree, it's $3.4 million, and professional degrees earn about $4.4 million in their lifetime. The value of a higher education is not only limited to the upward mobility of the college degree holder, but it also helps spur economic growth. For every 1% increase in the portion of a state's population, at least with a bachelor's degree, the state's real GDP growth rate increases by about 0.8 percentage points. That's huge. Advance. HBCUs are critical to the higher education landscape because they serve as enduring gateways to a college degree and upward mobility. We are also value-added partners to the workforce and economic development because we promote equity and diversity in a new economy that needs that equity and diversity by connecting employers to a pipeline of highly skilled and culturally diverse talent. This is why HBCUs continue to be important to the nation. We generate about $14.8 billion in economic impact at HBCUs, and we produce 134,000 jobs for local and regional economies. In fact, HBCUs produce 25% of African Americans who graduate with STEM degrees, although we are about 4% of the higher education population. What sets HBCUs apart from the rest of the higher education community is that we have a strong sense of community that is deeply rooted in appreciation for diversity. Because of our comprehensive student support networks and the sensitivity to cultural differences, our HBCUs outperform other institutions in graduating and retaining first-generation African-American students. Virginia's HBCUs collectively graduate more than 17,000 students annually. And Virginia's HBCU institutions are institutions of choice for students of color. While 34% of Virginia's 18 to 24-year-olds are Black or Hispanic, only 3 of the state's 15 public 4-year institutions meet or exceed that proportion. 2 of those institutions are HBCUs. The other is Old Dominion University. The impact of Virginia's HBCUs is not limited to the students we serve. Rather, our institutions are a vital economic engine for the Commonwealth and for local communities. Based on the most recent data available, we know that Virginia's HBCUs produce more than $913 million in annual economic impact and create over 8,404 jobs. Graduates of Virginia's HBCUs can expect to earn more than $9.3 billion during their lifetime. We are, as I said before, the highest producers of STEM for the African American community, And what we do is we meet students. Advance, please. We meet students where they are. We are deeply rooted in a commitment to ensuring that financial need is not a barrier to a college degree. We have significant experience supporting the needs of Virginia's low-income students, and just about 70% of our students are Pell eligible. That means that the majority of students who come here are Pell eligible, and Pell eligibility has an expected family contribution of less than or equal to $5,846. And the entire Pell Grant, the new Pell Grant, is $6,495. So if you think about what it takes to educate a student, even at an institution where we are significantly affordable, for our students, the gap is large. And in fact, if we look at our Pell cost of attendance for our in-state students, that is $26,710. And for our out-of-state students, $38,000. So to help make the college degree a reality for our students, we have to provide a lot of gap funding. We have $8.5 million in institutional aid that we apply annually just from Norfolk State University. And for an institution that does not have a large endowment and that has consistently, traditionally been underfunded, and I want to thank all of you for the funding we got this time around, because it changes things when we're funded at these levels. But because we have not had that traditionally, we are always in the mode of catching up. In preparation for 2021, because we know our population has a high need for support, we have earmarked $2.3 million of our COVID-19 relief funding to clear our student account balances for those students who were with us from spring 2020 through spring 2021 semesters. We know that many of them would not be able to return to the university if they were burdened with debts that would make it difficult for them to satisfy. We want to thank the support of the Virginia General Assembly and Governor Northam, who have launched NSU's Virginia College Affordability Network, known as VCAN for short. Both NSU and VSU are able to provide Pell-eligible students who are high school graduates and reside within a 25-mile radius of NSU's campus with no cost tuition. That is a game changer. We will be able to start with 97 students who have accepted this exciting program. We had hoped for 65, but we already have 97 who have accepted this program in its first year. This makes a college degree a reality for our students. Do know that our students are on track to be successful. As I noted earlier, we were founded from a belief that a college education is one of the strongest catalysts for social mobility. Student success is not just limited to retention and graduation, but it also includes post-graduation employment. And for that reason, as a president, I have focused on internships for our students. I believe very strongly that no student should leave this institution without at least one internship. And to that end, we know that internships lead to jobs. Usually about 67% of students who have had an internship will have a job offer. That's almost 70%. It matters that students get experience as well as exposure, and that they can hit the ground running like their peers. Higher education landscape has changed permanently because of the pandemic. And moving forward, technology will continue to be a dominant role in the delivery of higher education. At NSU, we've realized that, and we've begun to expand our online presence through our relationship with Academic Partnership, which is an innovative ed tech company that helps public institutions grow their online footprint. Right now, we are growing that footprint with graduate programs. We know that very soon we'll be able to move that to other opportunities. Also, through a $4.5 million appropriation from the Virginia General Assembly, we were able to expand our partnership with Apple and our Connected Campus program. It's an initiative that literally puts us at the leading edge of technology in terms of putting technology in the hands of our students. And one of the things that I say often is we want our students to have the same advantages that their peers from other institutions have when they go into the world of work. And so we're working very hard to ensure that that is the case. COVID-19 has forced students and parents to reassess what a higher education should look like. Again, internships will be a major component of that, but we're also looking at all the ways that we can transform the experience of a student so that the out of the classroom experience is enhancing the in-classroom experience, providing them with the tools and opportunities to do their best work in terms of being prepared to speak well, to write well, to think critically, to work on teams, and to value diversity. As the Virginia General Assembly reconvenes and considers plans for allocating the $4.3 billion in federal American Rescue Plan funds, Virginia's HBCUs must be a top funding priority. These new financial resources provide policymakers a unique opportunity to address historic and long-standing inequities in state funding support for Virginia's HBCUs. Institutions that, in fact, have a track record of improving the lives of the Commonwealth's underserved communities. Having come from large Research One institutions, I am keenly aware of the ways in which having that funding from the state government really changes the reality of your students. We need to increase state support for student financial assistance to help expand access to a college degree and reduce student debt loads post-graduation. And I am appreciative to the work that Governor Wilder and Secretary Dyke, who is also a Board of Visitors member at Norfolk State University, have undertaken to advocate for each HBCU in Virginia to receive $50 million. This will help in easing some of the historical issues that have happened for HBCUs, and it will give an opportunity for us to successfully support those students who are students who come to HBCUs, but students who give to the entire Commonwealth and to the country. For 140 years, Virginia's HBCUs have led the way on issues of success, access, affordability, and for generations, minority and underserved communities, these institutions are not just a part of Virginia's heritage, they are integral to the Commonwealth's future. I want to thank you as we think about the things that we have done on the Equity in Action Task Force, including looking at issues of equity in faculty hiring and promotion, looking at developing scholarship opportunities, looking at how we support descendants of slaves who were forced to construct the Commonwealth's flagship institutions, and engaging in the work of developing DE&I strategic plans. All of those things make a difference for our community. As we emerge from this pandemic, now is the time to make bold investments in higher education, investments that will make affordable access to a quality higher education a reality for every student. Thank you very much for the opportunity to offer testimony today. I look forward to any questions you may have.
Madam Chair, John Edwards, I have a question.
Yes, let me Thank Dr. Hold up, Senator Edwards. Thank you, Dr. Adams-Gaston, for your presentation. And so we will entertain some questions now. Senator Edwards.
Okay. President Adams-Gaston, thank you very much for this very informative presentation. I have a question with regard to which slide it is, slide 7, I guess. The focus on student success with regard to the over $7 million you received from Apple, Amazon, and the others. How exactly does this work? Is these scholarships generic type scholarships, or the scholarships that they want the students to take particular courses? So basically they're funding particular courses for the students. Tell me how this works. Give me an example.
Sure. Senator Edwards, and thank you for the question. There are multiple ways that these opportunities work. Some are in terms of, we've had boot camps to help students learn coding and to work on engineering problems with the members of the company and our faculty here together. We've had internship opportunities for students that give them real-time opportunity to engage with the company. We've had scholarship opportunities so that students would have a scholarship opportunity to close the gap in their final semester, their final year of being here, because we often find that our students in particular have difficulty going to school without also working. And so they would get to their final year and not be able to finish their education. And so a scholarship that would close that gap and allow students to do what they need to do in order to complete. So those are some of the ways in which we have worked with those partners to really prepare our students to be in the as they go into their careers, to be well prepared, but also to have the opportunity to be successful students and to be successful at completion, which is our focus.
Madam Chair, I have a follow-up question.
Senator Edwards.
I asked the question because I had a client of mine several years ago, very bright young lady, and I asked her where she went to college. She said, I didn't want the debt. I didn't go to college. Instead, she went to work with a company like Apple, I can't remember exactly which, that sent her to selected courses. She went to Harvard for a program and several other, got some great education because they paid everything, and she was making pretty good money for the company. I mean, it wasn't like a general scholarship. She didn't apply to college to go to college and then got a scholarship. It was the company sent her to particular courses in particular school, like I think some program at Harvard for a year, whatever it was. Is it like that, or how does that differ from the experience that I heard from a client of mine?
So some of them are similar to that. Sometimes they will, with an internship, and our students largely need paid internships. So it sounds like she sort of had paid internships, but just not through a university background. So our students go and they have internships. And if they're paid internships, they can afford then to do that. I was talking to a group really out of Hollywood who was working with HBCUs, and they were saying one of the issues that they found they had in trying to recruit HBCU students to find the numerous jobs that are in Hollywood, but that you're not going to get really if you've not had an internship, was that they'd give them an internship, it'd be a paid internship, but then they couldn't afford to live in LA. And so what they found was they had to also augment that with a housing stipend, which also happens often in DC, that students who go to DC because of the cost of housing, and I'm a native Washingtonian, can't afford it unless they're, and so many of our schools have housing already there. So they have houses that accommodate students who are on the Hill, who want, but if you're not from one of those schools, you're hard pressed to find a place. So those partnerships allow us to provide the same opportunities for students who come from schools that may have better endowments and more funding than from schools where we're having to stretch things.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions to Dr. Adams-Gaston? Okay, if not, we will go ahead and move to Dr. Pando from J. Sargent Reynolds.
Thank you very much. And can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you on a topic that we're so passionate about, and that is student success, especially among our most vulnerable student populations. And for over a half century, Virginia's community colleges have been on the front lines of the important work of access to post-secondary credentials and degrees. This past year alone, we enrolled over 257,000 people in the Virginia community colleges. And while that work of access does remain an important part of our DNA, we've shifted our gears, demanding more of ourselves to ensure that students are completing something of value, degrees and credentials that change trajectories, not just for the individual, but for families and for communities. I'm Paula Pando, president of J. Sargent Reynolds. We are the youngest and among the largest community colleges in the Commonwealth, serving the city of Richmond and surrounding counties of Henrico, Hanover, Goochland, Powhatan, and Louisa. Like most of my sister colleges, we serve a very diverse student population. At Reynolds, nearly half of our students identify as racial and ethnic minorities, the largest percentage being African American, and Latinos are our fastest growing population. This reflects the changing demographics of our service region, which was covered earlier through our friends at Chev. And our students come from all walks of life. This year's graduating class at Reynolds Community College, over 1,100 persons, ranged in age from 16 to 67 years old. And they come from every single corner of the socioeconomic spectrum. On average, 43% of our students receive Pell Grants. Even more, those who are not eligible by federal standards rely on scholarships, loans, and other programs to finance their education at Reynolds. In fact, in the fall of 2019, only 30% of our students paid full freight out of pocket. I always say, like apple pie and jazz and baseball, community colleges are a uniquely American invention. They truly are democracy's college, created to provide access to post-secondary education to communities once excluded, communities of color, first-generation students, returning servicemen and women, midlife career switchers, and displaced homemakers, the poor. We are what fills the space between what is today and what can be tomorrow. Connecting people to credentials that matter, aligning our curriculum with the business and industry needs of our region. Indeed, that localness is our superpower. Whether preparing students for transfer to some of the finest institutions in the Commonwealth for a baccalaureate degree, or directly to the workforce, or both, we serve as engines of equitable social and economic mobility. Your recent and historic investment in the G3 program will help us reach more individuals, low to middle income Virginians, like the ALICE population, ALICE coined by the United Way, asset limited, income constrained, employed, people working full-time jobs, where at the end of the month, there seems to be more month than there is check. You are giving, through this historic investment, an opportunity for Virginians to get the skills and credentials that lead to jobs and careers in healthcare, skilled trades, human services, and technology, fields that are in high demand today and offer a path to a good living and a good life. Thank you for making this possible. But great programs, we know, are not enough. We have always known that support services are important in a student's journey, especially the students we serve, who are largely the first in their family to go to college, living lives full of responsibility. Parents, caregivers, working one or two jobs. We actively disaggregate all of our data to better identify, understand, and address equity gaps in enrollment, persistence, and completion for various groups of students, ranging from race, gender, socioeconomic status, and zip codes. The pandemic laid bare just how vulnerable our students actually are and how fragile that safety net is. 40% of our enrollment loss came from zip codes where residents are low income and largely of color. As a first generation student myself, I didn't understand much of the college language being thrown at me. And as supportive as my immigrant parents were, they could not help me figure it out. Finding my person at the college was central to my success in that they helped me find my path, stay on it, and finish what I started. And so we have invested heavily in robust systems of student support. We've opened and expanded food pantries, partnering with agencies like Feed More because it's really hard to learn when you're hungry. We've stood up mentoring programs and partnered with Single Stop. Think of Single Stop as the Amazon.com type screening tool that connects students to services and benefits for which they qualify. At Reynolds, we recently surpassed the $1 million mark in benefits for our students, including SNAP, legal assistance, tax preparation, housing grants, and medical assistance. And with the help of the foundation, our educational foundation, we've been able to offer emergency grants, loans, and finish line scholarships, refusing to accept that a student close to completing but tapped out financially will not finish what they started. And with your investment, we are able to hire more advisors, navigators, coaches. This will go such a long way in giving more students their person to help them find their way and finish what they start. This work is continuing, and we are exploring the possibility of requesting ARP funds from the General Assembly to expand our partnership with community-based organizations to provide additional mental health support for our students. With the understanding that no one spends more time with our students than our faculty, we're also making significant investments in their development. We can't go back to normal because normal was never enough. We are creating a new playbook because we understand that equitable student success means placing students at the very center of everything that we do. We've partnered with the Association of College and University Educators, AQ, to provide our full and part-time faculty with meaningful professional development that leads to credentials, actual credentials in high-impact teaching practices and micro-credentials in inclusive pedagogy. We cannot aim for being a best practice institution without developing great practitioners. The pandemic forced us to move at a pace unknown to higher education, and what was once deemed impossible is now possible. We are putting the data in the hands of our faculty, data close to the actual practice, so they understand what is happening in their discipline and in their own classrooms, so they can develop strategies to improve student outcomes. In closing, I want to thank you for your time and your support. Over 80% of community college students stay in the communities they live in while attending community college. And so an investment in community college is an investment in the Commonwealth. And with that, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pando, for your presentation. Could we go back to the question that Senator Edwards addressed earlier about the enrollment trends? Sure. As it relates to community colleges? And what has J. Sergeant Reynolds experienced in terms of enrollment trends?
Sure. We are very much on the national trend of a steep decline in enrollment. And I will go back to the students we enroll. Most of our students are working full-time, some working 2 jobs. They are primary caregivers at home. This pandemic laid bare, again, how vulnerable these populations are, not just to pandemic, but to societal issues. Our students had to drop out because their children were home and there were no options for daycare. Our students had to work, many of them were frontline workers, and their hours were increased. Across the spectrum, we've developed a program, a very aggressive program called Project Reengage. And what we are learning from our students is even those students who did not have the issues of childcare, who did not have the issues of doubling and tripling of hours because they were frontline workers, they simply could not do this work in a remote setting, especially in our areas like Richmond and some of our more under-resourced areas. They did not live in an environment that was conducive to study. I think of my own kids. I have 3 college-age children. All of them were sent back home from their dorm in the pandemic, and they went back to a bedroom with Wi-Fi, with air conditioning, with a working laptop, and with a nagging mother that went to college. Many of our, so did you check in? Did you log in? Did you answer? Did you, et cetera. For many of our students who are the first in their families, and again, live very full lives outside of the classroom, this was simply something they could not absorb. For many of our students, our college campuses are the only places that are conducive for learning. They're the only ones, quiet space, technology that works, et cetera. So our decline was consistent with the national decline, and more sobering, the consistence of that national decline is that it was disproportionately present among African-American students and Hispanic students across the country.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I have a question.
Senator Edwards.
Thank you so very much for this a very good presentation. You dropped off for technology reasons when you were explaining that 30%, I think you said 30% of your students were paying full tuition. Did I get that right? Because it dropped off.
Full tuition out of pocket, yes. 43% are Pell. And then the other percentage that are not paying full out of pocket are taking out loans, are receiving scholarships, or some other form of aid. But about 30% of our students are able to and do pay full freight out of their pocket.
Madam Chair,
Senator Edwards.
You have a program like I know Tech does, and we have here in Roanoke. If you go to, say, the community college here, and you apply to go to the 4-year college fairly soon, you take the proper programs and you make the grades, you can go on to the 3rd and 4th year of college with a lower tuition. Do you have a program like that?
We have certainly relationships with community colleges that are within our vicinity. So our primary transfer partner is Virginia Commonwealth University, VCU. And we do have a couple of grants like the Mellon Grant and so forth that help students get their full junior status. And what's as important as cost is transferability. We all know that we have full faith in transfer credits, but does it transfer well? I'm sorry that we'll accept your calculus course, but you're going to have to retake it at the 4-year level, and we're just going to count that calculus course as an elective. And so we're as concerned as we are with cost. It's about true transferability, that you do not have to repeat the course.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions? Okay, thank you. Well, President Ryan, you're up, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Locke and Senators. It's a pleasure to be here, especially with my colleagues, Javon and Paula. I thought their presentations were incredibly informative. So I will talk a little bit about access and affordability at UVA for low-income students, as well as efforts to ensure their success. I will start by saying this is an issue that is near and dear to my heart because, like Paula, I was a first-generation college student, and I have experienced personally the transformative power of education. It not only changed my life, it changed my parents' lives, and it certainly changed the trajectory of my kids' lives. But beyond that, as a president of a public university, I think one of the most important goals of a public university should be an engine of social and economic mobility. And one of the reasons I was attracted to the University of Virginia is because I saw an opportunity there to improve what we were already doing in this regard. And that's why, if you go to the next slide, the very first goal in our strategic plan is to recruit and support talented, diverse, and service-oriented students, regardless of their economic circumstances. And what I thought I would do in the interest of time, I know the hour is late, is just talk briefly about 3 ways we're doing this, then talk a little bit about Pell students in particular, and then talk a little bit about supports we provide and next steps. So the first thing we do, if you go to the next slide, our financial aid plan, which we call Access UVA, and we meet 100% of demonstrated financial need of all students, and are only one of only 2 public universities in the country that does so, which was a statistic when I learned it that I found quite surprising. And we meet this through a combination of outright grants, work study, and need-based loans. And we're also consistently ranked as one of the best value universities in the country by the Princeton Review, U.S. News and World Report, and Money Magazine. And we're recently ranked #1 in financial aid among public universities by the Princeton Review. So we start on a strong foundation. But if you go to the next slide, one of the things I realized early on was that for a lot of families, they would assume that UVA is out of reach, even though they might have heard that we meet 100% of financial need. And part of the problem is that when you tell families that you're going to meet 100% of financial need through outright grants, through loans, and through work study, it can get really complicated really quickly. And people might not have an idea of, well, how much will I receive in grants versus loans, and how much work study will I have to do? How much debt will I have to take? So I asked our financial aid people if we could simplify the message that we send to families so people would understand what they could expect. And so on the day that I was inaugurated a little less than 3 years ago, we announced that Virginians from households earning less than $30,000 can basically come for free, no tuition, no fees, no room, and no board. And that was not much of a stretch in terms of what we were already offering these families in terms of outright grants. But I think it's a lot easier to understand when you tell a family that your child can come for free, essentially. We did something similar with Virginians from families earning less than $80,000 who can come tuition free. And again, we were close to that amount in terms of the grants that we were offering already. You can go to the next slide. We're also raising as much funds as we can to increase the number of scholarships that we have and to reduce reliance on tuition to help fund financial aid. So we have a bicentennial scholarships program where we will match philanthropic gifts, either dollar for dollar or 50 cents on the dollar, depending on the amount. And in the last 5 years or so, we've been able to generate more than $500 million in scholarship support for endowed scholarships. We also have a number of targeted scholarship programs that are focused on first-gen and low-income students, including the Blue Ridge Scholarships and the University Achievement Awards. And just this past year, we received a gift to create a partnership with the Piedmont Virginia Community College for transfer students. So roughly 15 or so students every year, once they receive their associate's degree at PVCC, will be able to come without having to pay in-state tuition or fees. And I'm really excited about that program. We have a terrific partnership with PVCC, and I hope that will be a model for additional scholarships for students transferring from community colleges elsewhere in the Commonwealth. If you go to the next slide, Now, if you focus on Pell recipients, I mean, the basic story is that we do really well by the Pell students that we have, but we don't have nearly enough of them. So we have among the lower percentages of Pell students in the Commonwealth. The ones who are at UVA, like I said, do quite well. The average net cost is quite reasonable, and the graduation rate is the highest in the country at 92%. But clearly, we have more work to do in terms of recruiting Pell eligible students. You can go to the next slide. In terms of support, so it's one thing to bring students to our grounds. It's another thing to make sure that we do everything we can to support them and ensure their success. And this really breaks down into three areas. One is financial. So what we have discovered is that a number of students, even though they're receiving financial aid that meets their demonstrated needs, don't have the funding to participate fully in the life of the university. So they don't have funds to join a club sports team, or they have opportunity costs and so have to take a paying job instead of participating in student self-governance, or they can't join Greek life. So we've created a new leadership and opportunity fund that is meant to provide small stipends to students so that they can take full advantage of life at the university. The academic support, there are a number of ways we try to support students, especially students who are vulnerable. I just listed a couple here. Our faculty have used disaggregated data to look at how students from different demographic groups have been doing in courses, and have used that to help redesign courses, especially in introductory STEM courses where the gaps in performance have been the most dramatic. So, for example, we had a introductory chemistry course that had a really large enrollment and an unusually high number of failing grades and grades of D, and also pretty large gaps between students of color and white students. We took that information and, with the help of faculty, redesigned the course to break it down into smaller groups and make it more engaging, and to provide more student assistance that help both close the gap and reduce the number of low grades overall. In terms of what I call social, that's really in the category of advising and support. So we have a number of programs to support students transitioning to the university. There's peer and faculty-led advising. A number of groups are focused on first-generation and low-income students. We have a new initiative focused on transfer students to help them acclimate to UVA. And we've recently hired a new vice president for student affairs, comes to us from Washington University, where she has a strong record of working with first generation and low income students. The last slide, in terms of the next steps. So the first goal really is to increase the percentage of Pell students at UVA, so that we are at least more comparable with our peers. The second is to continue to remove financial barriers to attending UVA and participating in all that UVA has to offer. And that means making sure that when we do the calculation of family contributions, we get it right, and we get right the mix of grants, loans, and work study. And then the last is to make sure that in everything we do, students from all walks of life, no matter what income bracket or what demographic they come from, feel fully a part of the university. So we have some work to do, but like I said, we have a strong foundation, and we have a lot of people who are incredibly excited about this work, including our new vice provost for enrollment, Steve Farmer, who comes to us from UNC, where he had great success in increasing the number and percentage of low-income students attending UNC. So I'm happy to stop there. Thanks again for letting me participate in this event.
Thank you, President Ryan. Are there any questions?
Madam Chair, John Edwards, I have a question.
Hi, Senator.
Go ahead, Senator Edwards.
First of all, congratulations on winning the national championship in lacrosse.
Thank you. Yeah, and fingers crossed for our baseball team.
Exactly. That'd be terrific. I'm interested in your being ranked number 1 in financial aid among public universities. And also your program with Piedmont Community College, the transfer program, where you provide full in-state tuition and fees. Are you doing anything like that with other community colleges?
Not yet. Like I said earlier, I hope that this program will be a model for partnerships with other community colleges. We're actually in conversation with a gentleman who is trying to set up these kinds of scholarship programs for transfer students at several universities across the country. And when he saw that we had created this partnership with PVCC, he approached us. And so our hope is that we'll secure funding to create partnerships with 3 additional community colleges.
Madam Chair, I hope you consider the Roanoke area. It's a Virginia Tech neighborhood, as you know, but a lot of people love UVA as well.
We'll definitely keep that in mind.
Thank you.
All right.
Other questions? If not, President Ryan, I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you familiar with the Education Reform Now report?
I don't know that I am.
Okay, I don't know when it came out, but it addresses some. You talked about a little bit of this in your presentation, but it talks about Virginia's higher education system and how it only scratches the surface when it comes to evidencing a commitment to diversity and socioeconomic mobility of students of color. And Virginia has the 7th highest post-secondary degree attainment rate in the country. But when it comes to Black and Hispanic high school graduates, that there's a very dismal record with regard to in Virginia's 4-year colleges and universities. When it comes to the state's Black and Hispanic high school students. And this report basically says that what we're moving toward is a de facto racial and economic segregation in Virginia higher education. And if you don't have it, I would commend it to you because it paints a very dismal picture of our higher education institutions in Virginia. And I don't think that this is what we want our colleges and universities to look like in the Commonwealth. And I think that what you have begun to discuss at UVA is moving toward a better picture.
Yeah.
And could you talk a little bit about what it is that, what you said that you all are beginning to plan out more of what you're going to do as it relates to recruitment and retention of Pell eligible students. Do you know exactly what that's going to look like?
So just to take a step back, I think you're exactly right that, Virginia as a whole has plenty of work to do to eliminate gaps in attendance and in retention and in completion. And I think all of us who are leading colleges or universities have a role to play. At UVA last summer, I put together a racial equity task force that issued a report. And one of the goals that they articulated that we adopted and the board endorsed is over the next decade to work towards ensuring that the demographics of UVA better reflect the demographics of the Commonwealth. Now, there are different strategies that you need to follow with different groups of students, and some of it depends on where the problems lie. So what we've discovered for Black students in particular is that the yield rate for Black students at UVA is lower than the yield rate for white students. And so the challenge there is in recruitment, not in admissions. And so we need to figure out, where are we missing and what are the gaps in terms of recruiting Black students who have been admitted to UVA. With Pell students, frankly, we've never had a goal with regard to Pell students. And one of the first things I talked with Steve Farmer, the new vice provost for enrollment, was about, shouldn't we at least have a target? And he said, yeah, absolutely. And that's his summer project. And the target will be, again, geared towards the median of what comparable institutions across the country are doing, and then, frankly, coming up with a strategy for how we execute on it. And I think it's, I think especially for first generation students, I think you have to think about the students you're trying to attract and recruit much sooner than, say, junior year in high school. By then it's too late. So some of it involves creating pipeline programs. We have some small pipeline programs, but I think we need to expand them. That means bringing students from around the Commonwealth to UVA when they're in 7th or 8th grade, and introducing them to UVA, and then staying involved with them throughout their high school careers. I think that's how you increase the number of low-income students and first-generation students in particular, who realize that, UVA is a school that they absolutely ought to think about attending. And so I think there's no silver bullet. I think it really is. It comes down to just making clear what your goals are, and then not taking excuses for not meeting them, frankly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any additional questions? Well, we're now down to comments and discussion from any of our subcommittee members. Well, I certainly want to thank our presidents for your outstanding presentations here this afternoon. We certainly appreciate you spending time with us. And thank you to our CHEV participants for being with us this afternoon. Thank you for your presentations. And thank you, Tyler, for pulling everyone together and coming on board with the higher education subcommittee. And if there are no further questions or comments or further discussion, we will see you next time that the higher ed subcommittee comes together. We have a lot of work to do here and a lot more to discuss. There being no further business, I will adjourn this meeting this afternoon. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you
for having me.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thank you.